Thank you for joining us today for Tenable Talk Live, responding to Mythos and Frontier AI vulnerability discovery. This approximately 30-minute session will be a conversation between our Tenable experts and all of you. So please put your questions for our speakers in the chat throughout the session, and they'll be happy to address them. A recording of today's session will be immediately available on LinkedIn and within the next few days on YouTube following today's broadcast. Today, I have the distinct pleasure of being joined by Jason Merrick, our Senior Vice President of Product. Hi, Jason. Thank you for joining us. And Gavin Millard, our Vice President of Product. Gavin, thank you for being here.
No problem.
My name is Justin Buchanan, and I'll be your moderator for today. So let's go ahead and jump in. Jason, Gavin, let's start with a question to set the stage. The introduction of the advanced frontier models like Mythos, GPT 5.5 Cyber are causing a rapid evolution in cybersecurity. Jason, let's start with you. Can you share your perspective on how the world has changed and what you're seeing there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we have to start with, well, what is Mythos? What are these frontier-based models? What was most interesting about Mythos, I like to say April 7th, the world changed. It began, we knew large language models were getting good at code. And with Mythos, the specific focus was to be good at math, computation, and of course, coding. And what they found was it was so good at coding, it could actually find vulnerabilities. And then what made it very unique was it was agentic and chaining these vulnerabilities together. And of course, that's why they kept it private preview. That's why they launched Glasswing, which was a small group of roughly about 40 companies specifically focused on being able to what they viewed as critical infrastructure and backbone of the internet. So that announcement happened. And I think the interesting part and the takeaway was really two things. One, I don't think necessarily the security world was surprised that frontier-based models were going to get good at code and being able to find vulnerabilities. I think that the surprise was that the amount of media coverage that it got, that it was on the morning news, that it was on talk shows. And it was not necessarily the security practitioners that were starting to ask the questions, it was board members, it was investors, it was executives that weren't necessarily security practitioners. So it was this flood of questions of, what are we doing? How are we, what's going to happen? And I think the second piece was as, CISOs and security practitioners out there, how do we now handle a potential, massive amount of new vulnerabilities coming in within our infrastructure? And I think that's really the two things that really changed.
Thank you, Jason. Appreciate it. Gavin, how about you? From your perspective, how are you seeing this evolve cybersecurity?
Yeah, so not to one up my good friend Jason, but I see three things, not two. So, first off, very, very much agree with Jason. I think the leveraging AI to find new vulnerabilities in code, I think is going to cause a lot of friction. Like, for example, Palo Alto, one of the members of Glasswing, they released their monthly patch or patches. And normally there's about 5 CVEs in it. This was the first one with Glasswing, and they announced 25 CVEs. So, like a 5-fold increase. There's the Mozilla one with 271 vulnerabilities. Obviously, browsers are very, very vulnerable anyway. Always got vulnerabilities in them. But I think we are going to see a lot of new vulnerabilities disclosed, and especially around things like open source projects where people are going to run these frontier models against open source and find like the next Log4Shell, but also a plethora of other less impactful ones. So first off, number one, people are talking about the vuln-apocalypse or the CVE tsunami or whatever you want to call it, but we're going to see this big increase in vulnerability and exposure disclosure. Secondly, is we're going to see a lot of automation with AI tools. I'm less worried about novel attack methods. I think they're just going to be amplification of existing methodologies by by using AI capabilities. So whereas an attacker would have only had one set of hands to target one or two infrastructures at the same time, we're going to see this amplification. Now, we also hear a lot about like machine speed. Like anyone that's been a pen tester or anything like that knows that it's not about speed, it's about stealth. So it's less about machine speed and more about machine breadth, right? Being able to go and automate simultaneously low and slow attacks against many different organizations. So that's number two. Number three, my one up is I'm going to see. I think we're going to see a lot of organizations, defenders, start to leverage AI to defend against these attacks as well. So we're going to see agentic capabilities leveraged to find and fix a lot of these vulnerabilities, because at the moment we've got this machine speed style attacks being targeting individuals or organizations, but we've got human scale processes trying to defend against them, and that's really where a lot of people have to focus on how to improve that disclosure to closure gap that they're going to be dealing with.
Thank you, Gavin. A reminder to our audience, if you're watching us on LinkedIn Live, on the right-hand side of your screen is the chat window. So please feel free to enter questions there into the chat for Jason and Gavin, and we'll be happy to address them. Gavin, while you're rolling, let's keep going with you for one more question that I think is on the mind of many. You talked about how there's going to be such an influx of vulnerabilities. At the same time, we have the National Institute of Standards and Technology no longer enriching all the CVEs in the National Vulnerability Database. And instead, as we know, they're only going to be enriching those in the known exploited vulnerabilities, the KEV list. So what's your thinking there? What do you see as potential impacts, and how should organizations prepare as a result of that?
So it's not just in the KEV. It is going to be ones that are potentially exploitable as well, or of potential high criticality. And thank goodness, right? Like, welcome to the 21st century, finally. Like, if you look now at the moment, we've got about 350,000 CVEs within the CVE database, and attacks aren't using 350,000 of them. They're using like a couple of thousand. The CVE KEV list is probably about 1,500, maybe 1,600, and enriching all of these CVEs that are never going to be leveraged by attackers is pointless. Right? So many researchers are going out and getting a CVE to enrich their resume rather than try and actually fix anything. So we see a lot of CVEs, and of course this is going to increase as well, right? I get messages. In fact, I got a message from my brother last week, who isn't in cyber. He's like, "Oh, I found a CVE in some code that he was working on. It got disclosed, got $200 for the bug bounty." So we're going to see lots and lots of things, these CVEs being disclosed, and enriching all of them is going to be a very, very painful process. Now, what's really interesting though is, of the 350,000 that I mentioned, about 50% are critical or high. So from a compliance perspective, people have been forced to update these CVEs, even if they're not actually exploited. Now, so I think what's going to be really interesting is how that enrichment process impacts compliance mandates around CVSS 7 and above. Right? We need to shift away from CVSS 7 and above. It's a terrible way of prioritizing vulnerabilities, even CVSS 4. And moving more towards the threat-based approach. Is it a potentially exploitable or known exploitable vulnerability? From a security perspective, if it isn't, I don't care. It shouldn't be on my remediation list. I'm not really bothered about it because I've got lots and lots of other things to deal with. I should just be focusing on those types of things. So for practitioners and vulnerability management teams, like to me, they've already made this shift, right? The VM to CTEM was like the precursor to this, really, where it's just like, let's just focus on the bad stuff and not worry about the less critical stuff, and let compliance, standard operating procedure deal with those.
Thank you, Gavin. Jason, anything that you'd like to address there before we move on to the next question?
Yeah, I think one of the challenges that organizations also have to think about is context. When they think about the asset, they think about the vulnerability, they also need to know the context of it. Is it business critical? Are there compensating controls? So really having an understanding of, and on top of that, configuration. A lot of attacks actually take advantage of misconfiguration along with the vulnerability. You look at, incidents like Salt Typhoon, where there were identity misconfigurations, cloud misconfigurations, and CVEs altogether. So I think the challenge organizations have to think about is what are those toxic combinations along with the vulnerabilities that are taking place. So it's it's an interesting time for security practitioners for sure.
Thank you. Okay, let's take a question from the audience. One of the members of the audience is curious to know how Tenable is leveraging AI and how we're using it to advance our products. Perhaps we could speak to Hexa, or where would you like to start, Jason?
Well, I think we're, at Tenable, it's very interesting. We've joined the OpenAI TAC. So being able to work with them and get access to their frontier-based models. We've got more to come with Anthropic. And so we're already going through and leveraging AI in many areas within Tenable through our entire tech stack. So it starts with research. Research is the most critical thing for Tenable. The research organization, when new CVEs come out or when we discover 0 days, we collect all sorts of rich information. We've been leveraging machine learning for over the last decade to go and enrich that information. We're now leveraging AI to accelerate, be able to capture that information and be able to provide that capability for our customers. The research team also goes through and creates our plugins. So we're leveraging AI to create those plugins much faster and get them out to our customers. So that's a critical component from the discovery. Then you look at Tenable One and our exposure management platform. We're leveraging AI and machine learning for prioritization and contextualization of the information. And then at RSA, we just launched Hexa, which will be going live next week at our exposure conference. And Hexa is basically horizontal across Tenable One. And this is our agentic AI orchestration, workflow, remediation, validation capability. So we're truly leveraging AI through the entire stack of our technology to be able to help customers deal with this, this new world that we currently live in. Gav, I'll turn it over to you and anything you think.
Yeah. As you said, I think we've been leveraging AI before AI was cool.
Yeah.
I can remember back when we actually defined cyber exposure management, the precursor to exposure management back in 2017, 2018. And like one of the core components of that was the automated enrichment of threat data into vulnerabilities. And you can't do that at scale without automation, right? So our research team are creating bespoke plugins, but actually gathering all of the threat data and then layering that on top of the vulnerability information is a very daunting task without at all. So VPR, vulnerability priority rating, was like the first piece of work really to come out of the data science team. But then we also brought out VPR2, and like VPR2 like massively expanded the amount of data that we included, that we used AI to go out and automate and collect. So we announced a partnership with Google Gemini, I think probably about a year or so ago, but we've been using it for quite a long time. And the amount of data now that we can get and give you context on the vulnerabilities and exposures is market leading. And as I say, we wouldn't be able to do that without AI capabilities. So now we can tell you that of those 350,000 vulnerabilities that have been disclosed, you don't have to care about 348,000 of them because they're not being leveraged by Salt Typhoon. They're not being leveraged by Shiny Spider or whatever. We're layering that context on because in the world that we're in now, like context is king when it comes to figuring out what work you have to do. So tell me, which vulnerabilities or exposures being leveraged against my type of company in my region that I need to care about, and then also tell me where I'm actually affected by it within my organization. And the only way you can do that is by, as I say, enriching with AI.
Thank you, Gavin. Yeah, and I appreciate you touching on how we're leveraging automation around things like prioritization and adding in capabilities for developing coverage, especially as these vulnerabilities are coming on so quickly. Scott in the comments made a statement about how it's going to take AI to keep up with AI, and I think that leads us to a good question of, historically, we've enjoyed a bit of a graceful patch cycle window in many programs where patch is discovered, and there's a bit of an agreement of 30 days or so to patch that. I think what we're seeing is that window is gone. So what is this new world, and how should organizations be thinking about this new state?
Yeah, so do you mind? I'll go first, Jace. So it's something I've been doing a lot of research on, and if you go and look at 0-day clock, you'll see the time to weaponize a vulnerability has gone from like 62 days on average a decade ago to literally hours. Right? There's a project called Moak, MOAK.ai, that's using AI to create exploit code against known vulnerabilities, and the average of that is probably like an hour. Like it's more about token spend rather than time now. So that disclosure to exposure window has literally collapsed. Right? We can't think about it in like a 30-day patch cycle anymore. So one of the things that I'm talking to a lot of my customers about now is how can you move from 30-day to 30 minutes? Like, and this isn't for everything. Like, you have to look at it from you need to split it from a compliance SOP, standard operating procedure, to this is bad because it's actually being exploited. How can I fix those few things really, really quickly? And then also split those as well from between a patch and a project, right? Because you can't update. I mentioned Palo Alto earlier, right? You can't update Palo Alto's firewalls in 30 minutes because it will have an environmental impact. It will, it will have a business impact. So you need to. But updating Google Chrome or Mozilla to get rid of those 271 vulnerabilities doesn't impact anyone. So like they're the things that you need to be doing within 30 minutes, right? And then really, really focus on drawing down that disclosure to closure time as fast as possible on the handful.
Yeah, and I think that just to echo what Gavin's talking about, I think for a lot of organizations, it sounds simple, but you start with building an inventory of your digital assets, right? So you really have to have an understanding of what you're responsible for. This is everything from cloud to identities, traditional IT, endpoints, your web services, your external attack surface. Being able to have that inventory is really, really critical. I think a second piece within that is continuous assessment. No longer is it, can you wait for a scan to take place? You need to have an understanding of the software inventory that's in your environment. And from there, the associated risk. And, really the thing that I think that a lot of customers are dealing with is how do we go from a static, human-driven, reactive environment to a continuous, AI-assisted, orchestrated, outcome-driven. And I think that's going to be a journey for customers, and being able to help them with that. Even our own CISO Bob Huber, he asked the question, what if every day is Patch Tuesday? What do we do? What about edge devices that literally, sometimes a patch will come out and even the vendor will say, don't deploy this patch until it's GA. What do you do then? So, it's an interesting time.
There's a great statement in the chat that says, "Is manual patching officially dead?" So it's a question that we posed to both of you, and I think there was some answer here. You know, both of you highlighted that there's some nuance. Some things will get much shorter, but some things will take longer. But there's a few questions here where people keep coming back to Hexa AI, especially as it relates to accelerating and augmenting these security teams as well. Would each of you like to talk a bit about how you see that playing into this new and accelerated situation?
Yeah, Gav, you want to start or?
You go first, old chap.
All right. So the approach with Hexa is a multitude of things. You know, where we have begun the journey with Hexa is, you know, helping the practitioner out of the drudgery, right? So drudgery being things like tagging, and tagging is absolutely critical for an organization. This is what drives reporting. This is what helps with prioritization. And hygiene within tagging is really critical. The other piece is dashboarding and reporting, being able to take that information and move it forward. We're also releasing an MCP server, so you can leverage things like Claude Code and actually go through and automate some of these procedures, like actual automated patching, and being able to leverage that. And, you know, as time goes on, over the next several months, we're going to be releasing a ton of new features within orchestration, remediation, validation, and really helping at, you know, AI speed to be able to help organizations defend.
Yeah, it's like yeah, when we were designing Hexa, what we didn't want to do is just stick a natural language search in and say that we're doing AI, right? Because that's not helpful to anybody. Yeah, it's a bit like back when cloud first started, and everyone goes, "Oh, we're cloud now," and in reality, you're just using an S3 bucket to transfer data. So, you know, for me, I think Hexa, and I'm pleased you mentioned it, like the MCP side is going to be a real game changer for organizations. Being able to actually automate the acting on the data itself is going to be incredibly important. So you know, tell me the 5 worst things in my environment, and then mobilize the either remediation or mitigation of that automatically. You know, human in the loop for a start, because you've got to build trust. But then I think what we're going to see is people are going to start removing human in loop as the demands increase, and they're trying to fix stuff quickly. So yeah, like to me, like Hexa really is like a layer above things like Claude. To be able to just automate as much as possible, because you know nowadays you can't be doing manual stuff. So you know, manual patching, yeah, is 100% dead, right? You can't be running around with a USB stick anymore because you know, you can't run fast enough. So you know, we're going to see this big shift towards you know, mobilization will become one of the most critical parts of you know, orchestration and mobilization will become one of the most critical pieces for defenders. And the faster you can do that and the more automated you can do that, the better.
No, and actually to add on to that, Gav, for Ziga and Raj, they're in the back of my ear telling me, you know, when they designed this and developed this, it was an action-based framework. That was the really critical component within that.
Yeah, exactly.
We started with leveraging Bedrock as the large language model to start with. We've now implemented Opus 4.7. And, you know, ultimately we'll give the capability for the customer to be able to choose what large language model they want to leverage for Hexa. So we're thinking ahead and making certain that we have that flexibility that customers can take advantage of it.
That's great. I want to address Daniel's question in the chat, and he's bringing us to the other side of the coin. So we've spent some time now talking about how we can augment security operations with AI to help make them more efficient, faster, more reliable. Daniel's question is sort of the other side, which is as we're giving employees access to all of these models to use them, we're going to have an explosion of shadow AI. So Jason, I think I'll start with you. As you speak to so many of our customers, what are you seeing in terms of shadow AI, what's happening out there? And then I'd love to bring the conversation to a place where we talk briefly about how Tenable can help with some of those challenges that you're seeing.
Isn't it an interesting world? It's like we've got AI that we've got to defend against, but then we've got AI that the employers are rolling out like crazy. And I think the analogy I like to use is it's very similar to cloud, where it was lift and shift, get out of the data centers as quickly as possible. and security was not really focused on. And that happened for, almost a decade. And then all of a sudden it was like, oh, security is a problem. We need to, focus on this. And the world of CNAPP got created. I think AI is even faster at this. The adoption, the rollout of the capabilities of everything from Claude Cowork, ChatGPT Enterprise, Copilot being embedded. And then, there's also things like OpenClaw, where I can actually go and have my own agent that I can go and have do work for me, for instance. So I think, again, I think it comes back to a couple of things. One is I highly suggest organizations, if you don't have it, is create an AI governance board first and foremost. So what is a fair use policy for employees? What are the capabilities that you're going through and leveraging? That's where we started actually as an organization, was a governance board from everything of the AI we're going to use, but also the AI we're going to leverage to build things, I think was critical. The second piece is also being able to build an inventory of the AI in your environment, I think is really critical. Being able to not only scan traditional IT assets, but your web services, your external attack surface, your cloud environment. Recently we had a customer that actually found 12 OpenClaw workloads running in their cloud environment, that was actually working as a QA person. So access to API keys and source code, like that was really frightening for them. It's an OpenAI framework that literally can download packages on demand, without any insight or control. So I think that's the starting point, is an awareness of being able to understand, what AI you have. And then I think the second piece is you also have to look at the AI that's being leveraged. Look at the agents that are being created. That's the other really interesting part, is employees can actually create agents that have connectivity to sensitive data, PII data, financial data, source code. How do you govern that? How do you manage that? How do you have an understanding of the configuration? So it goes deep, and I don't think there's a single solution that solves everything. I think there is some historical, current security solutions, your DLP solution, your endpoint solution that you can leverage, but I think there's new areas that organizations are going to have to leverage new capabilities. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Like knowing what's there is really important. And one of the areas that I think that you touched on really was like how much AI now is in things like browser plugins as well, right? And you're using like a grammar checking thing, but in reality, that's actually sucking all of your data out, and your corporate data. So it's really important to get that clear, concise inventory of your environment. We've got AI aware that customers can run and identify where these things are within the environment. I think that SASE is definitely a big play here as well. Not just things that are installed, but also what people are accessing within the environment. So being able to see and block at that point as well. So understand what you've got internally, but then also understand what employees are accessing externally, because it is a little bit like the cloud back a few years ago, and people were just moving stuff so quickly to the cloud without consideration of security. Like there was a case in the UK where an NHS, National Health Service contractor actually uploaded like every single one of our medical records to the cloud, right? And unprotected. And it thought it was a genius idea. It wasn't. But also, like it was like 27 CD-ROMs worth of data. Like possibly at the 26th CD-ROM, you might have thought, is this a good idea? I don't think this is a good idea. So it exposed all our data. But we're going to see that happen more and more, as people are like connecting AI to their data stores, and they're not having control around and how that data is actually used. So as Jay said, like having an AI governance board, I think is really important. Awareness is really important as well. And then just ensuring that the controls you put in place aren't stepped around by your users by simply copying it out of your corporate machine and dropping it on something else and pushing it out there anyway. So having like very good protections around where employees are sharing the data, I think is going to be more critical than ever.
Fantastic. I want to address Todd's question in the chat, and then I'm going to bring us to our final question. But Todd's question is, are any of the Tenable products able to monitor the use of AI on the endpoints? So we do have our Tenable AI exposure product. And what that does is it monitors your workforce, your employees, using these LLMs on their work laptop. So for example, with ChatGPT and Copilot, you can monitor the prompts that they're putting in and make sure that what they're sharing is appropriate and not all of the National Health Institute data, as Gavin just shared as an example. So if you haven't seen that, definitely take a look. Jason, Gavin, let's move into our final question of the day. We've been talking a lot about the tech side of it. Let's talk more about let's wrap up with the thinking on the program side of it. If you have one piece of advice that you could give to security leaders today, what would that piece of advice be? What would you leave them with as they're developing their programs in this new world?
So I think there's two sides to it, right? So there's the security practitioner side, what to do with the vulnerabilities that are going to be coming. And I think exposure management becomes even more critical. And exposure management is you have to be able to build that inventory of assets, have that understanding of the assets, the findings, and then be able to look for the toxic combinations, look for the most critical vulnerabilities, and be able to prioritize those. So I think that's the first piece, is to really have an understanding of the assets you're responsible for. I think the second side is that, how do we help the organization that's leveraging AI for productivity gains, but also secure it? And as part of that, I think it's critical to have the ability to have an awareness of what AI is running in your environment, but then on top of that, to be able to govern it. Everything from the ability to look at the agents that are created and be able to take action on those, whether you isolate those, you delete those, but also make you aware of how users are interacting with the data, all the way down to the level of, what information they're actually tying into. And also looking for things like, AI-based attacks, things like prompt fuzzing, prompt injection. So there's really two sides to it. It's how do I leverage exposure management to, with AI to be able to combat the AI that's, attacker that's potentially or will be coming. And then also, how do I enforce governance within my organization to secure our AI and our utilization of it? Gav?
So, Justin, I'll play by your rules and actually give one thing rather than Jason's sneaky two things. But well done, Jace. That was very smoothly done there.
I had to one up you one time. You one up me.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, like for me, it's all about focusing on how do I reduce that disclosure to closure on the most critical vulnerabilities and exposures that will be targeted by attackers. Right? Look at the processes that we have today and the outcomes that we're trying to get from those processes to deal with this stuff, and how can we optimize it in the most efficient way to disrupt the paths the AI augmented attackers are going to take and make it as difficult as possible to break in. So don't optimize for everything. Optimize for the few things that will be targeted by attackers and close them as fast as you can.
Well said, both of you. Thank you very much.